Well, while we have a look at the ASP service, it might be useful if you had your own ASP to hand and maybe pause the video at various locations and had a look at what your ASP is telling you about your school. Now, ASP was around in 2017. Before that, we had Raise Online, and before that, we had Panda. So this is the latest version of performance data for schools. Now, ASP, you now log in using the DFE sign-in. So this is no longer through Secure Access. So it used to be that you had to log into Secure Access, click on Analyze School Performance, and then log in again into another sign-in. Well, now you don't have to do that. Instead, all you need is a DFE sign-in credentials, an email address, and a password. And as I say, you don't have to go to Secure Access. Instead, you can go to https, the S is very important, / www.analyse-school-performance.service.gov.uk. However, I quite like this second one that I'm going to give you, which is services.signin, no hyphen with sign-in, signin.education.gov.uk, because this allows you to access a wider range of services that are used with the DFE sign-in. So it could be things like Key to Success or School to School. And once you have signed in, you get to the main screen. So this is my favourite fictitious school, the Much Binding in the Marsh Academy. Now we've got all of these various tabs down the left hand side, but for me the most important tab is this right at the bottom, List of Reports. So when I click that, we have access to your Inspection Data Summary Reports. So this is your IDSR, which is the replacement to the dashboards that had in 2016 and before. The IDSR is the first document that Ofsted will look at before coming to your school. So the actual inspectors themselves, they will familiarise themselves with the IDSR, and you can download your IDSR for the past 3 years there. Now the school performance summary, this is the equivalent of the Raise Online PDF that you used to be able to get. And now in 2018, you can actually download it as a PDF. For me, for my site, I find that I require to print it out at A3. For some people, it's readable at A4. And the Key Stage 2 version starts at Progress in Reading, Writing and Maths, and then Reading, Writing and Maths combined. The combination of those two is the floor standard and the coasting standard, which we'll get to later. You then have your average scaled score, and then your Key Stage 2 disadvantaged measures, and then individual, more detailed analyses for reading, writing, maths, and then GPS or SPAG and science. At Key Stage 1, you have your expected standard in reading and then a greater depth standard in reading, and it seems to me that there is a higher emphasis in the ASP on the greater depth than there used to be in Raise Online. You then have reading, writing, maths, science. You then have various phonics information. Early years foundation stage, absence and exclusions, school characteristics, these 3 are generally updated in December or January. So you may find, for instance, you don't have access to early years, but you may have access to absence and exclusions. You will get notifications from the STA, that's the Standard and Testing Agency. They have a weekly newsletter that goes to all admin holders. So someone in your school will get a weekly newsletter letting you know when any of these have been updated. Alternatively, you can sign up for their newsletters. So this is the STA website. So I've just Googled STA and gone down to Standards and Testing Agency. And you can see here is the assessment update at the time of recording, but you can get email alerts, or if you prefer RSS feeds, you can subscribe to the feed. I get emails alerts. So it's a weekly newsletter, generally on Tuesdays, which comes out with all of the latest information. So if I click on this one, and go to schools, you can see the information that they're publishing, quite detailed, about what you need to know. The rest of the list of reports allows you to go into any one individual report. So whereas a school performance summary is a long, comprehensive document, if you just want to go to, say, Key Stage 1 reading only, then you can do that in the list of reports. So basically almost everywhere is accessible from the list of reports. So in the next video, we'll have a look at why you should be interested in what the ASP says. So why should you be interested in last year's results? Hopefully they were good for your school, but the pupils may have left your school or gone into a new key stage. Well, Ofsted are interested, and the way that we know that they're interested is through a document called the Ofsted Inspection Handbook. Now, the handbook is available on the internet. As of the time of recording, it's had its last major update in July. Now, there is a very long URL, but personally I just Google Ofsted Inspection Handbook. Now, the framework, the Ofsted Inspection Framework, will change as of September 2019, but what I'm telling you is of the current framework. You can volunteer to have your school inspected under the new framework if you wished. But let's have a look at the current framework. There are some 6 different judgments that Ofsted will make if you exclude the 16 to 19-year-olds. And when we say a school is good, we generally refer to the overall effectiveness, but I want to talk about outcomes for pupils. So how do you measure overall effectiveness? Well, this is what Ofsted said. If your school is outstanding overall, then your quality of teaching, learning and assessment is outstanding, and everything is likely to be outstanding or good and rapidly improving. If your school is good overall, then the quality of teaching, learning and assessment is at least good, and everything is good or outstanding, or if it requires improvement, it is improving rapidly. So requires improvement is the absence of good in at least one of the key judgments, and inadequate is the presence of harm. So why do I want to talk about outcomes for pupils? Well, I've done this analysis based on the 2016-2017 Ofsted inspections. And for all of the schools which were outstanding overall, 95% of the time, the outcomes for children were outstanding. If a school was good overall, 99% of the time, outcomes for children were good. If overall a school requires improvement, then 98% of the time, outcomes for children requires improvement. Now, inadequate is the presence of harm. So it might be a safeguarding issue or something else. But even so, 79% of the time when a school is inadequate overall, its outcomes for children are inadequate. So how does Ofsted measure outcomes for children? We can see this high correlation with overall effectiveness. Well, here is some of the detail, and it's well worth reading this section between around paragraphs 175 and 205 in the current version. So inspectors will take account of current standards and progress, including the school's own performance information, and make a relevant judgment for pupils, evaluating the extent to which they progress well from their different starting points and achieve or exceed standards expected for their age nationally at the end of key stage. So it's progress and it's attainment. And in paragraph 187, we see that in judging achievement, inspectors will give most weight to pupils' progress. However, Ofsted seem to have rolled back from that at the Key Stage 1 area. It used to be in 2016, 2017, that you had measures looking at the difference between early years and Key Stage 1. Now, those measures have disappeared. And while Ofsted may still look at a form of progress from early years to Key Stage 1, it's more attainment at Key Stage 1. Additionally, inspectors will consider the progress of pupils in all year groups, not just those at the end of a key stage. So they'll be using pupils' books and tracking software and talking to pupils and teachers. For your most able pupils, Ofsted will looking to see how your pupils are making progress towards attaining the highest standards. So it's not sufficient for your Key Stage 1 Level 5 pupils to be making the expected standard. Your Level 3 pupils. It's whether they're getting the highest standards, the high standard or greater depth. For your lower attaining pupils, are you getting them to a situation so they reach standards expected for their age? So in old currency, your Level 1 pupils at Key Stage 1, have you got them up to Level 4? Have you jumped a level? They're meant to make 2 levels of progress under the old curriculum. Did they make 3? Inspectors will also consider the progress of pupils who have special educational needs and or disabilities in relation to the progress of all pupils nationally with similar starting points. So your SEND pupils are not being compared against the national SEND, they are being compared against the national all. However, for pupils whose attainment is unlikely to rise above low, so we could be talking about pupils on P scales, then inspectors will look at their learning and progress relative to their starting points and not attainment. So they'll most likely be using your internal tracking systems. So for your SEND pupils, make sure that they are particularized enough so you can actually see progress. For example, suppose there was a pupil who was at Standard 2 at the beginning of term and ended the term at Standard 2. It may be that they've gone from the bottom of Standard 2 all the way up to the highest Standard 2, but if your tracking software shows that they've made no progress, that may be what Ofsted focuses on. So make sure it is particularly calibrated so that it can show the real progress that your pupils are doing. For your disadvantaged pupils, inspectors will consider the progress made compared with that made nationally by other pupils. Now the term other pupils sounds a bit ill-defined. I prefer the previous version of the Ofsted Inspection Handbook where it actually made it explicit. In doing this, inspectors will take account of the progress and attainment of non-disadvantaged pupils nationally. So your disadvantaged pupils are being compared with the national non-disadvantaged. Surely that's not a fair measure. How can your disadvantaged pupils get up to the national non-disadvantaged or the national other? Well, Ofsted aren't necessarily looking to see whether they have made the national other. They'll be delighted if they did. But inspectors will consider the impact of what a school is doing to reduce the differences. So in other words, this is the closing the gap or the diminishing the differences measure. It's not that you've reached the national other, it's what are you doing to try to get there. Now, Ofsted do a newsletter every 2 months, and the September 2017 newsletter, and these are published on the internet, was quite interesting. It said, pupils like SEND make up a diverse group and tend to have a very small number of pupils, and their averages are likely to have a degree of unreliability. Additionally, data on groups can be rendered meaningless due to the small number of pupils and high variation in their results. So how is this translated? Well, Ofsted say that they will not, and here's the official terminology, comment separately on any individual cohort group which has under 11 pupils in a single year. So your disadvantaged pupils, if there's 10 or below, your SEN pupils. However, They will look at trends. So they'll look at your 2017 and your 2018 data for, say, disadvantaged pupils, if there is at least 6 pupils in each year. So if you had 13 pupils in this current year, they can look at the one particular year's figures. They'll probably be able to look at the trend as well. If you've got 9 this year and 5 in the previous year, then they won't comment separately because there isn't at least 6 in each year. So what happens if this happens? How does Ofsted actually evaluate your school? Well, this has been inserted into the latest edition in quite a few places of the Ofsted Inspection Handbook. Where performance information is limited, inspectors should consider a wide range of other evidence, including reviewing pupils' work and talking to pupils and teachers. So this is what Ofsted is going to do, and in fact we have seen quite a lot of inspectors looking at pupils' works, looking at tracking software and evidence of talking to pupils and teachers. In the next video we'll start to have a look at the ASP and we'll start with early years. Thank you very much for watching this video. Why not like us and subscribe to this channel? And why not subscribe to our free premium mailing list where you can get 10% off our best prices and advance notice on what's happening.